Welcome, critters! I'm Claire Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine critical episodes, plot lines, characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. This particular episode is about Campaign 1, Episode 27, Part 1, and joining me today is Atlas.
Hey!
Feels like I haven't seen you in forever because we took October off.
It's been a while.
But we're here, and we're ready to rock. So the icebreaker for today is, when did you get your first cell phone and what kind was it?
I got my first cell phone at the end of 8th grade, and it was a very square, like those ones that had, it wasn't a flip phone, but like flipped open to show a full keyboard.
Oh, the slide ones?
Yeah, but it opened like a flip phone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like are you talking about like the rectangular ones that open with
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it was like wine colored. It was a weird pinky purpley nonsense.
Yeah.
And it was great because it was a tank. Nothing could break that thing. I think it got passed down to both of my brothers.
Wow. You don't see that anymore. You don't see that.
No. Yeah.
Mine was, I was 13, and the reason why my mom insisted on me getting one at 13 is because my dad forgot me at school one day.
Whoops.
Because usually my mom was the one to pick me up, but for some reason or another she couldn't this particular day, and so she had that, and they're divorced, so it was a bit of a communication thing going on too, and I never got picked up.
That's a good reason.
And it was just me and the janitor being like, are you gonna do something about this? Because I don't know.
Yeah, I think I got one because I was going to high school, and I was going to be at a different high school or a different school than the brothers, so that way I could communicate with somebody. Yeah.
And that point we had the Nokia bricks,
not
the Nokias with the little antenna on them, but just like the straight up Nokia bricks. It's just like a and those things broke all the time. Like, I remember there was one time I was running down the hallway at school and I had my phone in like my hoodie pocket in front, and something with the movement of me running caused the cell phone to like slip out of the pocket.
Great.
And it went like flying down the hallway, and it just like broke into like 15 different pieces when it hit. And I was like, it's like the slow-mo, like, as it goes.
My second cell phone I drove over with my car. It still worked for another 2 years, so
man, you have good luck.
I miss those.
Like, it was one of those cell phones where like the case, you had to like click it together to like get it to work. That was back in the day. I think
a lot of me misses the old cell phones.
At least we don't have to do the like, what is it, 9 texting thing where it's like 3
that part
to get to see.
I never had to do that, thank goodness. But as much as I miss the robustness of some of the old phones, don't miss that.
I mean, I didn't get my full keyboard phone until I was 20, 21, something like that. So I did the like 9 texting thing for 7, 8 years with my first few cell phones.
I did it with my mom's like old school flip phone for a little bit before I got mine. I was never any good at it.
Man, I remember being so good at it that I could do it without looking. I could just count what the button was, you know what I mean, and be able to text without looking at it. But you can't do that with today's phones.
No, you really can't. They're a lot harder to hide in class.
They are. Yeah, for me it was while I was driving, which is, don't do that, people. I was a very rebellious teenager, but
we all go through phases.
Yeah. All right. Well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. As always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well. So please comment, like, subscribe below. And ready? All right, let's dive in. This episode begins with Vox Machina returning to Amon after assisting a couple of farmers outside the city with a livestock theft issue, and it opens with Percy, who had stayed at the keep after a confrontation with the two people responsible for the death of his entire family, Lord and Lady Briarwood. He is caught in a dream as this episode opens and is spoken to by a mysterious voice about vengeance and a bargain. The voice tells him that its gift is his and that the gift shall bring him justice. But he comes to consciousness and realizes that he had fallen asleep at his bench in his workshop underneath the keep. He heads out and finds a chair next to the jail cell in the basement where the guard Jarrett should have been sitting, watching over the prisoner guest? ? But instead, Jarrett seems to be held in the air against the wall with invisible hands around his throat. He shouts for help and then rolls for initiative. Percy goes first, shooting at the space behind Jarrett, hitting whatever invisible entity is there, and Jarrett falls to his knees on the ground, gasping for breath. But Percy gets attacked by another invisible entity, and the first starts grappling the prisoner inside the cell. Trinket, who had been left with Jarrett, attacks the entity that's harrying Percy, and Jarrett gets up to get the cell door open. The rest of the party at this point hears the faint ring of gunshots from outside the keep as they return, and so they all roll for initiative, rushing inside as well. Percy goes again, shooting the entity right in front of him, but misfires, so he pulls out bad news and swings it to the entity like a cudgel. The entities attack again, one against Percy and one against the prisoner. Trinket attacks again, then Jarrett grapples the entity inside the cell and pulls it out into the hallway. The rest of the group now make it to the armory at the top of the stairs leading to the basement, and Vex runs down first, shooting an arrow at the entity by Jarrett. Then Hunters marks it. Keyleth makes it into the stairway, then Grog goes into a rage and runs to Jarrett. He crushes a vial of holy oil in his fist and punches the entity. Tiberius tells Vax that his cape is looking very nice. Then Vax clicks his boots of haste and darts into dagger the entity by Trinket and Percy. Tiberius aims a glacial blast at the entities, Scanlan dimension doors into Percy's workshop and inspires Percy. And then Percy clears his misfire but misses his next shot, so he spends his action surge trying to do it again, killing off the entity by him and turning Tiberius deaf for a round. The remaining entity attacks the prisoner again and knocks him unconscious. Jarrett attacks the entity with his sword, but misses. Vex shoots an arrow. Keyleth casts Fairy Fire, and then Healing Word on the prisoner to bring him back to consciousness. Grog hits the entity with his Flaming War Hammer, then Vax daggers it and kills it off. Vax claps Grog on the back and says, "You softened him up for me." Then Tiberius runs over to Desmond, the prisoner, and hands him the sandwich from his pouch that he had made earlier. Vex also casts Cure Wounds on him as Scanlan yells from the workshop to ask if it's safe, and Grog blesses Desmond with his bloody holy oil hand. Desmond asks them what happened and what those things were, with Vax identifying them as invisible stalkers. They are typically used as assassins with a singular assignment. Vex asks him if he knows about any particular protections against them, and they decide to look into it. Jarrett says that he recommends that they tell him next time he might be up against invisible things in his duties, and he was definitely not prepared for them. Vex apologizes and says that they didn't know to warn him. He asks what exactly they are up against, and Tiberius tells him either vampires or liches, as one does. Tiberius assures them that there will be some sort of security changes made in the coming days for the keep, and Jarrett also asks that there be some change in their income as well. He says that it suddenly changed from a standard guarding job to going up against the denizens of the afterlife, and he says that he is up for it if the pay is good enough. They tell him that they will definitely discuss that, and he leaves them to go check on the rest of the guards. Desmond, still in shock, eats his sandwich quietly, and Vex suggests that he stay in the guest room from here on out. He says that he told them that the Briarwoods would come for him, and Vex reassures him that he's still alive. Vax sits down next to him and tells him that they understand that he's a victim of circumstance, but they aren't leaving his side. They will do their best to protect him, and Grog even volunteers to sleep by his side for extra safety. Keyleth offers to go ahead with the planar binding for an elemental, but Desmond asks Vax to make sure that he will be far away from Percy, particularly. Vax promises him that, even though he has valid reason to fear Percy, Desmond will be protected while under Vox Machina's care. Desmond says that he trusts them and begs Vax to not let the Briarwoods get him. Vax says that they may be fuck-ups, with Tiberius interjecting, "Speak for yourself," but they're not without ability. Vex tells Grog to carry the bed that had been put in the prison cell back upstairs, and Tiberius goes looking for their butler, Erwin, but changes his mind when he realizes that it's close to dawn, so they decide to go to bed instead, with Scanlan rolling a natural 20 as he hides underneath Percy's bench in the workshop while Percy tinkers on his guns. Perky. I mean, that can be a nickname for Percy. Why not?
Sure.
Vax approaches Keyleth and asks if she's okay. She says, yep. He then asks if she needs anything. She says nope. Then Grog places some caltrops in the inside of the doorway to give another layer of protection for him and Desmond as they sleep. So they sleep for a while, waking up in the afternoon and make their way to the kitchen for a meal. Their housekeeper tells them that while they were sleeping, a group of farmers came by to drop off produce for them, and she presents a variety of dishes. Grog rolls for his beer check. Tiberius rolls to train Lockheed a bit, and they start eating. In the middle of the meal, they are interrupted by the sudden appearance of Seeker Assume. Vex says that he's sneaky, and Grog tells him that they have a problem with him at the moment. He says he knows, and that's why he's here to speak with them. First, he thanks Keyleth for casting Greater Restoration on him. He says that Lord Briarwood had cast some sort of mental charm on him during the fight and has been clouded in his judgment for the past few days. He also apologizes for upholding the charade at the palace. I was like, that does not make sense there. He apologizes for upholding the charade at the palace, and Vax apologizes for fucking up his plans in the first place. Vax says that he thought he knew better, but was wrong, and Assume accepts his apology. He says that he fears that Sovereign Uriel has also fallen to the same mental charm from the Briarwoods and has been clouded in his judgment since the dinner. They say that they suspected as much, and Scanlan says that he's fallen to such influences before, referring to the events that happened pre-stream, which is why Vox Machina are heroes in Amon in the first place. Assume agrees and says that while Uriel is a good man, he is predisposed to outer influence from those who are more strong-willed. He says that is why Assume insisted on keeping up the ruse during their meeting at the palace. It was too dangerous to try and attempt to cleanse Uriel of the charm at the time. Keyleth asks him why he continued to uphold his charade after she restored him, and he answers that when you're under the Briarwood's influence, it's much more difficult to speak against them to others who are also under the charm. He wanted to stay within Uriel's good graces to give Vox Machina a better chance. Vex asks if he thinks it's only Uriel under the influence or the rest of the council as well, and he responds that Alora seems to be of clear mind, and the Briarwood's attempt seems to be focused on Uriel. Scanlan asks Assume to clarify that he means that the Briarwoods corrupted Uriel during their dinner while they were all sitting there, and Assume says yes, it only takes a glance. Vex exclaims that they could have been influenced, any of them themselves, and Tiberius says yes, they did influence him, and it was rather inconvenient. Assume says there are a few options at their disposal and asks if they have any ideas on how to restore Uriel sooner rather than later. Vex asks Vex asks if it's possible to sneak into his room and restore him without anyone knowing. And Assume says that that might be a mission for the quieter members of their group, should they be a little more intelligent with their actions moving forward. Tiberius asks if they can invite Uriel to a luncheon or something, but Assume says that Uriel has grown very careful and defensive due to recent circumstances. They start discussing a potential plan where Vax sneaks into the palace with Keyleth polymorphed as a fly or something, but Scanlan argues that if they are caught, it is 2 members of Vox Machina against the entirety of the palace guard. They argue for a bit, and Scanlan asks Assume to be the voice of reason. Assume says that their plan is quite inspired, but if they fail, they face immediate incarceration and or death of both individuals. They argue more, wondering if their first priority is to clear Uriel's mind or to work on clearing their names. Assume says that whatever they choose to do, they must let him know, because if they require his assistance, he is intending to leave for Wildmount to research more about the Briarwood's past behavior. He says he was thinking of leaving the next day, and Keyleth goes to fetch Percy to include him in this conversation, but finds him lurking just outside the door and already listening. She asks him to come in and offer his input, to which Percy responds, "I don't feel like doing that. Lead on." Grog asks Assume if their prisoner would be safer in their hands or within the castle walls, and Assume says that their enemy currently has an open invitation to the palace, so they might be better off protecting him at the keep. They argue more about their options, and Tiberius asks if Assume would be willing to delay his travel plans, but Assume says that he already made arrangements. Scanlan asks Percy for his opinion, who says that they are now in the situation they are in because he was unprepared, and they now know how much they don't know when it comes to the Briarwoods. He says that if they face the Briarwoods now, Percy will get them all killed. Tiberius agrees, saying they need proper preparation, and suggests that they arm themselves with better weapons against vampires. He also suggests that they need to figure out how many innocents are in the town of Whitestone, because perhaps they can fly in with an army from Draconia. He says that the Draconians made him an ambassador, and Vex says that she didn't know they had a whole army at their disposal. He says that they must strengthen their partnership with Amon, however, because the Draconian army won't go into Whitestone alone. Keyleth says that she agrees, that she doesn't want to destroy their relationship with Amon in the process. Vex interrupts their discussion, offering a plan where they wait for Assume to go do his research in Wildmount, deal with Uriel's charm in the meantime, and then deal with the Briarwoods once they have more information. Orion makes his infamous half-chub comment, and Assume says that getting to Wildmount is not easy or safe, so he cannot linger for long. Percy asks him how soon he will return, and Assume says that it depends on if he even does return. Every spy he has sent so far to seek information has not come back. Tiberius gives him a bit of his magic message paper and tells him to let them know if any harm befalls him. Then they argue a bit more. Vex finally asks Assume what he wants, and Grog asks if Assume wants Vox Machina to come with him to Wildmount. Assume says that his journey requires the utmost stealth, silence, and speed, so he does not want to add them to the mix. He says that this journey may take him weeks or months, he doesn't know. He says that he's doing it so that if Vox Machina does fail in their efforts, then he can come back with proof to rally all of Amon against Whitestone. Grog asks Assume that if he dies, could he write a letter that explains Vox Machina's innocence, and Assume promises to try his best. Keyleth Druid crafts a wooden armband for Assume so that she can scry on him, and Scanlan says that they've always sought out the path of the most glory, and he thinks that that means they should go after the Briarwoods. They argue some more, and Keyleth asks if Assume would be willing to help them get into the palace that very evening, but Assume says that he can get them inside, but not to Uriel's room directly. They argue some more, and Scanlan makes the case for getting to kill everyone in the Briarwoods castle, whereas they would be fighting innocents in Uriel's. Tiberius objects, saying that there are innocents in Whitestone too, and Scanlan shuts him down, saying, "You killed an old lady." Grog interrupts them all and asks if they can just put it to a vote, because Percy is being oh so quiet about all of this. Vex says, "This is your fucking family. These are the people who attacked your family. Do you have no contribution to this?" Percy says that he still feels like he owes everyone an apology and that he feels terrible dragging them into all of this. Vex yells that they are choosing to do this, and Keyleth says they're in this now, but a voice whispers in Percy's ear saying vengeance. And Percy says, if you're with me, we can be prepared for them this time. He says they know enough to be prepared, and Tiberius asks if he can have 8 days to prepare. Percy says that he thinks a week to prepare is reasonable and that then they can leave Amon quietly. Keyleth objects, but Vax says that the law of Amon has been compromised and that he agrees with Percy. Grog calls for a final vote and they all agree, so Assume takes his leave. Vax stops him before he leaves and asks to speak with him in private. Percy stops everyone before they scatter and thanks them for doing this for him. He says that he fears his temper before this weight is lifted from his heart. He does not wish to lose himself like that again and apologizes for everything he's done. Tiberius lays a hand on his shoulder and says he's sorry for the tragedy that is his family and promises that he will do his best to help him fulfill the names that are engraved on his gun barrel. Percy says that he will do his best to maintain himself in the meantime, and as the voice creeps into his ear again to say yes. Vex pulls Assume aside and asks if he'd be willing to teach her how to be more stealthy like him. He promises to teach her what he can in the days before he leaves for his trips, and they agree to meet at dawn to start training. And that's where they end for the episode, or break for the episode. What do we think of this first half?
I think so. Last episode was very clearly like a limbo episode, stall for time while we wait for Taliesin. I think we're still in limbo here. We're still very much in a transition episode where we're not getting very far for all of their talking that they're doing.
Yeah.
But I think we do get a couple very interesting character impressions out of it. I think Percy is interesting because he is so quiet. We're still seeing very early days Percy, where he hasn't really grown into the noble of Whitestone that he will become.
Yeah.
He is still very much the lost boy that ended up on a ship for 2 years. And you can tell here because he's not ready to have an opinion about anything that is happening, but he is integral to it all. So much of this revolves around him, and yet he won't speak. And that's so different from who he becomes over the course of his campaign. Yeah. And I think something that a lot of people forget he started as.
Yeah. And people are mad at him for it. And yes. I find that reaction also very fascinating.
That one, it's interesting, but I also kind of understand it.
Yeah.
Like, we're behind you. We've told you we're behind you, but we need you to be talking at least, like a bare minimum of participation, because we've put our necks out for you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand the anger. But I also understand that habits die hard, and Percy's not ready to break some of those my past is a hidden deep dark secret habits.
Yeah, I don't think any of them know how to deal with trauma at this point in time.
No, most of them don't by the end of the campaign. So
they have some skills built at that point in time.
They get better. They do get better. I will give you that.
Yeah, but I don't think they are as unclouded in their perspectives enough right now to recognize the struggle that Percy's going through.
Yeah, and I think they're bringing a lot of personal baggage to it too. I think the most obvious one is Keyleth.
Yeah,
she's very hung up on this. I can't make a misstep when it comes to the law of Amon. So even though it puts the entire party in a bad position, she's very adamant that they need to, stay on Uriel's good side, even if right now the good side means their jail or death, most likely. So it's interesting to see that perspective, but she's so locked onto it and so clouded by it that even her voting to go after the Briarwood Woods surprised She's so stuck on her own mission. And Tiberius is the same way, and to some extent so are the twins, but
Mm-hmm.
they're more, they don't have as distinct directives right now.
Yeah,
And I
definitely.
think that's part of why they're easier to convince. But
Yeah,
everybody's coming in with their own ideas of where they should be going and why. And it's not a cohesive group yet.
yeah,
We're still building that team, and they're still figuring out how to work towards one goal at a time without letting their own get in the way.
yeah. I mean, that's the difficulty when you have a group where there's no obvious leader, too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that that's what Keyleth is really looking for here. She's looking for authority outside of herself. And
Right.
that's definitely part of her journey, is learning that the authority comes from inside rather than outside. And we'll see
Yeah.
the evolution of that as the campaign progresses. But she's definitely still staunchly in this phase where she's looking for everyone else to tell her what to do, but also simultaneously having a very strong opinion on what to do at the same time, which I think is creating so much internal conflict for her,
Mm-hmm.
spilling out.
Yeah. She's very much looking for someone to validate her opinion, like some figure of authority to validate what she thinks.
Yes.
And I think that's part of her journey as a leader is her right now she's still figuring out what that means. And so she's looking for somebody else to confirm that she's taking the right steps.
Yeah.
Which I have interesting thoughts about when it comes to learning leadership. But it's not a particularly effective way to do it. Let's just put it
No.
there.
And
Uh,
like, hashtag relatable.
yes, that too.
Like, this is one of the things that I like love hate about Keyleth as a character, is because like she has all of the same hang-ups that I did when I was
Hmm.
younger. And I'm like, oh no, honey, oh no, we learned about this. We learned about this. Please, no.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting. And I think that kind of brings me to the other super interesting character in this part of the episode is they start looking to assume to be that authority figure. Um, and Assume is an interesting character just as a character, but I think it's super interesting that Matt brought him in now,
Mm,
to kind of help guide this conversation. It's still as convoluted as it is.
yeah.
Um, but he's interesting both as, a seeker of knowledge and as someone who is trying to navigate the very complicated idea of a court under siege, essentially. Um, but also as kind of a DM insert to guide the
Yeah.
characters,
Yeah.
which is necessary right now.
Yeah, I think it's genius of him to, because we see him do this in a lot of different characters in a lot of different ways, but sometimes the group just needs someone to be like, no, this is your decision. I'm not giving this decision to you. This is something that you are all having to figure out on
Mm-hmm.
your own. And because if the DM didn't provide that character for them to bounce off of to make that realization, then they just spend many episodes running in circles trying to figure out
Right.
exact information that Assume can just give them in this conversation. And so,
Yeah.
like, they needed to go through all of the, like, but what if we do that? No, that's not possible. Or what if we do that? Well, that's really dangerous. Or what if we do that? They had to have that type of wall to bounce off of. Otherwise, they would have stayed in this arguing space for so
Mm-hmm.
much longer.
And
And
it's long enough as is.
yeah, right? Like, they've done too much arguing already. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we all need that in our life sometimes. Like, I feel like that's what Google is sometimes
Little bit.
for me, of being
Yeah.
like, is this worth going down the rabbit hole, or am I just like gonna hit a wall immediately and like help
Mm-hmm.
figure that out?
Yeah. And I think it's kind of integral to how Matt runs his games.
Yes.
Um, because at a different table, it would totally make sense for them to above the table just start asking the DM questions.
Mm,
that's not the kind of game that Matt or any of the players are interested
Mhm.
in playing. And
Yeah.
so having a natural way to build in a character
Yeah.
that he can communicate with them through
Mhm.
is super important to him being able to drive the plot. And them
Mhm.
sitting around in their keep does not offer a whole lot of options.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
having Seeker Assume come in um, was kind of the only option that was going to work right
Mhm.
now. Alternatively, maybe a Laura,
Yeah.
but even
Maybe.
then we run into consequences later on in the story, whereas Seeker Assume can kind of do this
Yeah.
and be hidden and be sneaky about it.
Yeah.
Um, and it gives Assume a chance to explain some of the details of his um, choices in the
Mm.
palace.
Mm. Yeah.
Uh, to
Yeah.
try to keep that relationship clean. And it's just a good choice in so many ways and so important to how Matt is running things,
Mm.
uh, that it's just functionally a very interesting way to look at things and one of our early experiences with the way Matt needs to
Mm.
interact with these characters and
Mm.
kind of what the limitations of that are.
Yeah.
He can't explicitly say, guys, stop it. He has to go through what knowledge the character has and try to keep it in character. And it puts him in some weird positions sometimes. But this time, I think we get to see it play out in a way that is very clear and concise and very obvious as to what he's doing.
I think it's almost a palate cleanser
Yes.
because after the fight with the Briarwoods, after the fight with the broker, they had a lot of opinions being thrown at them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you shouldn't have done this, or oh, I'm disappointed in you. I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed, like
Yeah.
because like Uriel was like, nah, 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 Aurora
Right.
was kind of like, mm. like, like there was judgment, but it was like kind judgment.
Like, I'm going to keep it to myself, but you're going to know it exists kind of
I'm
judgment.
not mad, I'm just disappointed. But then we have Assume who comes in, who is just like, whatever, like, let's talk about next steps. You know what I mean? Let's
Yeah.
dwell on what happened during the fight. Like, yes, you fucked up
Mm-hmm.
my plan. And like, yes, thank you for the apology for fucking up my plan. And now what are we going to do about it?
Right.
It was definitely the palate cleanser they needed because they needed to get out of that emotional reaction of
Mm-hmm.
emotional reaction of the emotional reaction. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They had to get out of that cycle.
I think I agree for the most part. I think that they go a little bit too far
Mm.
in losing their connection to what they need to do next
Mm-hmm.
in terms of emotion. And that's why it takes them pushing Percy to be like, what do you actually want? And his emotional connection to bring them back to an actual decision.
Yeah.
Um, I
Because
think
it's also kind of the worst thing you can do to a character like Keelan,
right.
who is looking for that direction. And it's also like kind of filling the vacuum that Percy is creating, but
Yeah.
there's stuff going on.
Yeah. I think if Percy had been kind of balancing out the, very logical side of Assume, we would have gotten to a decision much faster.
Oh yeah.
Um, but I don't think that the decision is going to happen without one or the other. Either way, they get stuck in a loop.
Yeah.
And they need that balance in order to move forward at any level.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, are there any personal experiences that are coming to mind with you for this?
Um, Mostly I was reminded of trying to make decisions with groups of people that don't want to have opinions ever at all. Because it just turns into everybody's going in circles and nothing ever happens. It happens a lot in like professional spaces because nobody wants to be the voice of opinion. Everybody wants to be accommodating and flexible because those are the key buzzwords in professional situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I've got a project at work that has now been delayed into probably April of next year because nobody made a decision ever. And as much as I would like to say I made that decision, I did not. I didn't want to be that person either.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, that's kind of along the line of my personal experiences, is like I can get stuck. I was having a conversation with a friend this week where I was particularly stuck in this one narrative that I was telling myself over and over again, like a explanation of past events and stuff like that. And I just kept revolving around this narrative in my head and having the same conversation with myself over and over and over and over again. And finally, I was like, you know what? I just need someone external to me to like hear this narrative and help me just like close it. So like, I just need someone to be like, all right, yes, that happened. And now what? You know what I mean? Like I assume in my life to just be like, all right, I hear you, I see you, this is things that happened, and now what are we going to do about it? Like, I'm not going to tell you what you should do about it either, but I'm just going to like kind of pose questions until you come up with a next step of action for yourself. And that, having that external person to do that for you is so important when you find yourself just spinning in these circles, because it was very unhelpful behavior for Percy to isolate himself in his workshop after all of these events. And I'm sure he was in that same space of like just circling with these narratives over and over and over and over in his head without actually talking about them with anyone. And I think Elith kind of had like the opposite approach, where she was like talking a lot about it, but not going anywhere with it. It's like she was trying to process, she was trying to do something with it, but it just, the actions she was trying to use in this situation weren't necessarily helpful either.
Yeah, and I think we've all ended up in one of those spirals at some time or another.
Absolutely.
Yeah. For sure.
And like, I'm surprised that Vax still isn't in his. Like, he's been in his for a couple episodes now as well. Like with the whole what happened with the Rakshasa, and then moving into the whole like Kynan thing that happened, and then also fucking up the Briarwood fight and like kind of initiating that. And like, he's made a lot of mistakes in the last however many episodes, and it's almost like this situation has kind of snapped him out of that as well.
I think this situation does snap Vax out of it because he's less connected to it. It's not his emotional connection to spiral over. You know, he's made mistakes, but he's there to help a friend, and there's an external like driver here, and it's not his own. Like, those decisions that he made were made in the heat of the moment, but they were made in the purpose of helping someone else. And someone who is still spiraling. And I think that is what Vax focuses on right now, and I think that's why he's still in the headspace to be able to be a little bit outside of this, because he is still very much in the we're in the middle of something headspace versus we're out of something, I made mistakes and now I'm going to dwell on them kind of headspace.
Yeah. We won't see Percy in that space for a while, but
no.
It does happen.
Yeah.
Well, what are we going to do about it?
I think the thing that came to mind was, we've been talking about spirals a lot. I'm going to keep doing it because it's where I was at.
You're spiraling in the spirals.
We're spiraling in the spiral. But the thing that struck me was, when you get into a spiral, something has to change, and sometimes that has to come from you.
Yeah.
You know, so Percy choosing to leave his workshop, you know, people choosing to talk to and listen to assume, you know, making a single choice to try to change something means that the spiral can end. And so my, you know, what am I going to do out of this was make be cognizant of the spiral and look for an exit. Look for something that I can change that isn't, this huge, I don't have to make a final decision, but what's the little thing I can change now to make this go somewhere that isn't in this spiral?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even something as simple as changing the environment you're in can be so impactful to those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Like, that was a piece of advice from my father back in the day that I very begrudgingly did not want. Like, whenever I got really upset about something, he was like, go for a walk, like at least get out of your bedroom. Like,
Yeah.
just go for a walk, put yourself in a different environment. I'm like, man, I don't want to. I'm in the pain.
Yep.
But
Yeah.
that's something that we've seen pop up in the pandemic too, is our little like daily walks for our mentee bees. Like, we need them.
Yeah. I mean, even something as simple as change the music you're listening to.
Yeah.
Switch it up, make your brain focus on something different, even if it's just a different beat.
Yeah.
It's little things go a long way when you're stuck in a spiral, in my experience.
Do you know what my latest has been? Blanket capes.
Yes. Delightful choices.
Because it like takes away just that one level of stress of being cold. And like, because it's just those little things add up, over time. And if I find myself getting angsty about the fact that I'm cold when I walk from my couch to my bathroom, I can fix that problem by wearing a blanket cape.
That's fair. My go-to lately has been taking off my shoes. I really hate wearing shoes, like in any context, but it's been okay. If you're in a really bad mood, take off the shoes for 10 minutes, even if you're at work, your feet are under a desk.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's those small things that can just have the biggest difference. Is like, are my pants uncomfortable? Do I feel like I'm being strangled by my waistband? Like, just those tiny stressors can relieve a lot of pressure when you just take them off and just be like, all right, now I can think because my belly isn't being mad at me, or my feet aren't being mad at me, or I'm actually yeah, it's amazing how those little things add up. I'm trying to think if there's like any other to-dos that I have on my list with this topic. I mean, it's pretty much also being aware of when you are in those spirals. I think that is also a very pivotal step of that process.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I need to step back a little bit and recognize that I'm just like spinning in the toilet bowl of hell. Like,
right. And I think it's harder to do when you're spiraling with other people.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's, when you get into something like this episode where you've got 7 people sitting around all spiraling together in slightly different directions.
Yeah.
It's so much harder to recognize and pull out of.
Yeah.
So that's one to look for.
Yeah. And like just the having regular check-ins with yourself throughout the day. Like, you don't have to create a meditation practice. I know a lot of people are like, oh, meditation practices, but like just having that 2 minutes at the end of the workday, or the 2 minutes at lunchtime where you're like, all right, where am I? What am I feeling? What do I want to do about it? Like,
right.
It's important.
It is. And it doesn't have to be much.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, anything you want to add before we wrap up for the day?
I don't think so.
Well, it always feels like a therapy session. So powerful stuff that we're talking about today. And audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and feelings and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how Critical Role episodes like these have impacted you in your own lives. And this is a very pivotal episode as well. So we'll talk a little bit more about that next time.
Inevitably.
Inevitably, but it is the end of an era, this episode, and the beginning of something new. So I'm excited to go on the journey with you all. Special thanks to Alice for joining me. It's been
always happy to be here.
Yeah. So next time we'll be discussing Campaign 1, Episode 27, Part 2, and joining me will be Atlas. So I'm excited for that. And I'm always looking for more co-hosts and guests. So if you're interested in coming on this podcast and sharing your own experiences and perspectives, please reach out to me. I'll send you the link. In the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below. Follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR. And I just realized that I haven't updated the Tumblr in months. I should probably do that. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and be they chaotic good you wish to see in the world. Take care, guys.
Bye.